The letter arrived on weathered paper, creased from 1,000 readings. Ink faded, but words still sharp as broken glass. Captain Declan Brennan had written it in a tent somewhere in the Saudi desert, February 1991, 6 days before his FA-18 would spiral into the Kuwaiti sand in a ball of fire and twisted metal. Kira, you're 6 months old now. If you're reading this, I didn't make it home. The handwriting was steady, no tremor, no hesitation. The mark of a man who'd made peace with his death before it came for him. Your mother will raise you strong. I'm counting on that. But I need you to remember something, and I need you to remember it forever. Strength without wisdom destroys. I've seen warriors who were strong but stupid. They got themselves and others killed. I've seen warriors who were smart but weak. They hesitated, and that hesitation buried them. You need both, strength and wisdom, power and restraint.
The paper had traveled through 33 years and 6,000 miles to find Lieutenant Commander Kira Brennan standing in the pre-dawn darkness of Camp Pendleton, California, October 2024. Her father's words echoing in a mind that hadn't slept properly in 3 years. She folded the letter back into her jacket pocket, the same pocket where she kept her seal trident and the dog tags of a man she'd killed with her bare hands. The sun hadn't broken the horizon yet. The Pacific fog rolled in thick and cold off the coast, turning the base into a landscape of shadows and amber security lights. Somewhere in the distance, a drill instructor's voice cut through the morning stillness, already breaking down some fresh-faced recruit who thought he was tough enough for this life. Kira knew better. Toughness didn't mean shit if you couldn't control it. She'd learned that lesson in blood. The main gate appeared through the fog like something out of a war movie. Chain link and concrete floodlights casting hard shadows, an MP booth with bulletproof glass, and a Marine who looked like he'd rather be anywhere else at 0530 on a Monday morning. Kira handed over her orders without a word. The Marine scanned them, his eyes flicking from the paper to her face and back again, lingering on the rank insignia at her collar. Lieutenant Commander, Navy, female, the trifecta of things that didn't quite compute in his early morning brain. He waved her through without comment. Smart kid. The admin building squatted at the center of the base like a concrete toad, all hard angles and government issue ugliness. Inside, fluorescent lights hummed with that particular frequency designed to give you a headache and destroy your will to live. A clerk sat behind a desk that had probably been manufactured sometime around the Korean War, surrounded by filing cabinets that predated the invention of the computer. Lieutenant Commander Brennan, Kira said.
Reporting as ordered. The clerk, a woman in her 50s with the look of someone who'd seen every flavor of military bullshit and developed an immunity, didn't even glance up. Just pushed a clipboard across the desk. Sign in. Building 3, second floor, office 214. Colonel Garrett's expecting you. Kira signed. The pen was chained to the desk. Of course it was. She found Building 3 without difficulty, climbed stairs that echoed with the hollow sound of government construction, walked down a hallway that smelled like floor wax and old coffee. Office 214 had a frosted glass door with black stenciled letters. Colonel R. Garrett, Base Commander. She knocked twice. Sharp. Military. Enter. The voice that answered was gravel and cigarette smoke, the kind of voice that came from 30 years of shouting orders into desert wind. Colonel Richard Garrett looked like he'd been carved from the same concrete as his building.
55 years old, hair gone gray at the temples, face lined with the particular kind of exhaustion that came from fighting bureaucracy instead of enemies. He sat behind a desk, buried under file folders, coffee cups, and what looked like the remnants of a sandwich from sometime last week. Lieutenant Commander Brennan. He stood, offered his hand. His grip was firm, professional, the handshake of a man who'd learned early that respect wasn't automatic. Thank you for coming, sir. Kira shook his hand, noted the calluses, the slight tremor that suggested too much coffee and not enough sleep. My orders said training evaluation, but the classification level suggests there's more to it than that. Garrett's mouth twitched. Not quite a smile. You're direct. I appreciate that. Sit down, Commander. We need to talk, and we don't have much time. Kira sat. The chair was uncomfortable, probably by design. Keep people from getting too relaxed, too comfortable, too willing to waste time. Garrett reached into a drawer and pulled out a file folder. Red stripe across the top. Classified. He slid it across the desk. Before you open that, I need you to understand something. What you're about to see doesn't officially exist. This conversation isn't happening. And if anyone asks, you're here for exactly what your orders say, routine training evaluation. Kira opened the folder. The photograph stared up at her with dead eyes. A young man, maybe 1920 at most, baby-faced. The kind of kid who probably enlisted thinking he'd find glory and brotherhood and all the things the recruiters promised. Instead, he'd found a metal slab in the base morgue. Private First Class Dylan Chambers, Garrett said, his voice flat, emotionless. The voice of a man delivering bad news he'd delivered too many times before. 19 years old. From Augusta, Georgia. Found dead in Bay 3 training facility on September 4th. Official cause of death. Accidental cervical fracture sustained during grappling training. Kira studied the photograph. The kid had a good smile in his service photo. Genuine. The kind of smile that belonged on a kid heading to college, not a corpse heading to a funeral. You don't believe it was an accident, she said. No. Garrett pulled out another photograph. This one showed the body clinical and horrible, the neck bent at an angle that made Kira's stomach clench. The medical examiner ruled it accidental. But the ME is young, inexperienced, and very susceptible to pressure from people with more rank than sense. Someone pressured him to rule it accidental. Someone. Garrett's jaw tightened. Dylan's father is Sergeant First Class Robert Chambers, retired now. He was my radio operator in Mogadishu 93. When our convoy got hit and half my team went down, Chambers dragged me 200 meters under fire with a bullet in his leg and his radio shot to pieces. Saved my life. He pulled out a pack of cigarettes, looked at it, put it back in the drawer, trying to quit. Kira guessed, not succeeding. I owe him the truth about his son, Garrett said. The real truth, not some sanitized report designed to protect someone's career. Kira closed the folder, but she couldn't close out the image of that broken neck. She'd seen enough death to know what violence looked like, and this wasn't training. This was rage. Why me? She asked. You've got investigators, MPs, JAG. Why pull in a SEAL for a training death investigation? Garrett leaned back in his chair, studying her, with eyes that had seen through too many lies to miss one now. Because you know the difference between an accident and murder, he said quietly. Because you won't be intimidated by rank or reputation. And because you have a very personal understanding of what happens when training goes wrong. The air in the office suddenly felt too thin. Kira's hand moved unconsciously to her jacket pocket, where her father's letter rested next to her trident, next to the memory of a throat collapsing under her hand, of eyes going wide with shock and fear of blood on her knuckles, and a voice screaming for a medic who would arrive too late. June 2021. Bud's Training Facility. Petty Officer Travis Holden, 29 years old, drunk on power and testosterone, his hands on seaman recruit Jessica Palmer, 18 years old, and frozen with fear. Kira had intervened, verbally, professionally, by the book. Holden had shoved her, hard, and Kira's training had taken over. 25 years of karate compressed into one perfect strike. Shudo uchi, knife hand to the throat, the kind of technique that was supposed to be pulled, controlled, measured. She hadn't pulled it. Holden's trachea had collapsed like wet cardboard. He was dead before the medics arrived, drowning in his own blood, while Kira performed CPR on a corpse, and Jessica Palmer screamed and screamed and screamed. 18 months of investigation, a hearing, testimony, evidence. Video footage that showed everything except the split second of decision when Kira chose to defend instead of de-escalate, to strike instead of restrain. Justified self-defense. No charges filed. Case closed. Except the case was never closed. Not really. Not in the 3 a.m. darkness when Kira woke up, feeling phantom blood on her hands, seeing Holden's face, hearing the wet, horrible sound of his breathing stopping. The Holden incident, Kira said. Not a question. You know about it. Everyone knows about it, Garrett replied. The question is whether you've learned from it, whether you can look at Dylan Chambers' death and see past your own guilt to find the truth. He leaned forward, and for the first time, Kira saw something in his eyes that wasn't exhaustion or cynicism. It was hope. Desperate, fragile hope. I need someone who understands that violence has consequences, he said. Someone who won't dismiss this as just another training accident, because it's easier than admitting we have a problem. Can you be that person, Commander? Kira looked down at the folder again. At Dylan Chambers' smile. At his broken neck. At the waste of a life that should have had decades ahead of it. Yes, sir, she said. I can. Garrett nodded slowly. Good, because you're not doing this alone. He picked up his desk phone, pressed a single button. Send him in. The door opened without a knock. The man who entered was built like a brick wall that had been weathered by 60 years of hard use and harder decisions. 61 years old, maybe 6'2", with shoulders that still looked like they could carry a full combat load across 20 miles of bad terrain. His hair was iron gray, cut high and tight in a style that had probably never changed since his first day at boot camp. His left hand was missing 3 fingers, the remaining digits scarred and twisted. But it was his eyes that caught Kira's attention. Gray-blue, sharp as broken glass, and completely devoid of anything soft or forgiving. They were the eyes of a man who'd seen the worst humanity had to offer and decided to keep living anyway. Lieutenant Commander Kira Brennan, Garrett said. Meet Master Chief Garrett Callahan. He'll be your shadow on this investigation. Callahan didn't offer his hand, just stood there studying her with those merciless eyes, taking her measure the way a sniper measures distance and wind. Master Chief, Kira said, coming to attention. At ease, Commander. His voice was rough, abraded by decades of cigarette smoke and desert dust. We're not standing on ceremony here. You're SEAL. I'm Force Recon. We both know what it means to get our hands dirty. He moved to the window, looked out at the base coming to life in the early morning light. Marines running PT in formation, their cadence calls echoing across the parade ground. Somewhere a flag snapped in the wind. I knew your father, Callahan said without turning around. Trained him from 87 to 90, Force Recon School, Captain Declan Brennan. Best warrior I ever had the privilege of serving with. Kira felt something catch in her throat. You trained my father. Taught him everything he knew about close quarters combat. Taught him how to lead Marines into situations where most men would piss themselves and run. Callahan turned from the window, and now his eyes held something that might have been respect. He wrote you a letter before Desert Storm. Do you still have it? Yes. Kira's hand touched her pocket. I read it every day. Then you know what he believed. Strength without wisdom destroys. Callahan's scarred hand gestured at the folder on Garrett's desk. That kid in the photograph, Dylan Chambers, he was destroyed by someone with strength and no wisdom, someone who thought power was the same thing as skill. He crossed the room, stood directly in front of Kira, close enough that she could smell old tobacco and gun oil. Your father died protecting his wingman, Callahan said quietly. Took a SAM meant for a Nugget pilot who couldn't keep his spacing right. Could have evaded it, should have evaded it. But that would have meant letting a 23-year-old kid with a wife and a baby at home get blown out of the sky. He pulled something from his pocket. A photograph creased and faded showing two young men in flight suits standing in front of an FA-18.
One of them was her father, 33 years younger, grinning like he owned the world. The other was a baby-faced pilot who looked scared and trying to hide it. That kid grew up to be Admiral Thorne, Callahan said. He's on the review board that cleared you of the Holden incident. You think that was coincidence? Kira stared at the photograph. Her father's face, so young, so alive, so utterly unaware that he had 6 weeks left to live. Your father saved Thorne's life, Callahan continued, and Thorne saved your career. That's how honor works. That's how debt works. Now it's your turn. He slid another photograph across the desk. This one showed a young Marine in dress blues, standing at attention, chest out, chin up, eyes bright with the kind of determination that comes from believing you're invincible. Dylan Chambers wanted to be Force Recon, Callahan said. Like your dad. Like me. He had the heart for it. Maybe even the talent.
But he never got the chance to find out, because some sadistic son of a bitch with a god complex choked him to death on a training mat. Kira picked up the photograph. Dylan's eyes stared back at her, full of hope and naive courage. Who? She asked. Corporal Riker Donovan, Garrett said. He pulled out another file, this one thicker, more worn. 29 years old, Marine Raider, Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu black belt, undefeated record in base competitions, 47 wins, 0 losses, never been submitted. He opened the file to show a photograph of a different kind of Marine. Where Dylan looked fresh-faced and eager, Riker Donovan looked like he'd been carved from granite and rage. Square jaw, cold eyes, the kind of physical presence that filled a room and demanded submission. Donovan runs Bay 3 like his personal kingdom, Garrett continued. He's got a following. Junior Marines who think he's the second coming of Royce Gracie. He hosts these unofficial fight nights every Friday. Hammer Hour, they call it. No rules, no refs, just ego and violence pretending to be training. And Command lets this happen, Kira said. Garrett's face hardened. Command looks the other way because Donovan's father is Lieutenant General Marcus Donovan, 3 stars, currently assigned to MARSOC Command, very influential, very protective of his son's reputation. So this is political. Everything's political when generals are involved. Callahan lit a cigarette despite the no smoking sign on the wall. Garrett didn't say anything. But politics don't change facts. Dylan Chambers is dead. Riker Donovan killed him. And we need proof that'll stick even when a 3-star general tries to bury it. Kira looked from Garrett to Callahan, understanding settling over her like a weight. You want me to get close to Donovan, she said. Observe his training. Document his methods. Find evidence that links him to Dylan's death. We want you to do your job, Garrett corrected. Training evaluation, safety protocols, by the book. If Donovan happens to incriminate himself in the process, so much the better. And if he doesn't, Callahan exhaled smoke through his nose. Then you push him until he does. Men like Donovan, they can't help themselves. Give them enough rope and enough ego, they'll hang themselves every time. You're asking me to bait him. I'm asking you to be what you are, a SEAL, a karate master, a woman in a male-dominated environment who knows how to make insecure men feel threatened just by existing. Callahan's smile was sharp as a knife. You won't have to do much, Commander. Just show up. Do your job. Let nature take its course. Kira stood, walked to the window, looked out at the base. Somewhere out there in Bay 3, Riker Donovan was probably already training, already building his legend, already setting the stage for the next Dylan Chambers. I need access to everything, she said. Training schedules, personnel files, video footage, and I need autonomy. No chain of command interference. You'll have it, Garrett said. Officially, you report to me. Unofficially, you report to no one. Do what you need to do. And when Donovan figures out what I'm really here for. Callahan crushed out his cigarette on the windowsill, pocketed the butt. Old habit from deployments where you didn't leave traces. Then we'll see if you're half the warrior your father was, he said, or if you're just another officer playing dress-up in a uniform you don't deserve. It should have been insulting. Instead, it felt like a challenge. The kind of challenge Kira had spent her entire life rising to meet. She turned from the window, faced them both. Where's Bay 3? The combat training facility occupied the eastern edge of the base, a sprawling complex of warehouses converted into what the Marines optimistically called a close-quarters readiness center, and what everyone else called the meat grinder. Bay 3 was the largest space, a cavernous room that smelled like sweat and rubber, and the particular kind of testosterone that came from too many men trying to prove too much to each other. The floor was covered in thick mats stained with years of impact and occasionally blood. The walls were decorated with photographs of victories, submissions, knockouts, a shrine to violence masquerading as a training facility. At the center hung a larger frame, Instructor of the Year, Corporal Riker Donovan. His image captured mid-throw face, twisted in a snarl that looked more predatory than professional. At 0630 on a Monday morning, the place was already packed. Kira stood in the doorway, watching the chaos unfold with the detached attention of someone studying a foreign culture. 24 Marines, grappling, striking, sweating, their grunts and impacts echoing off the high ceiling. An instructor circled them, shouting encouragement that sounded more like threats. Keep pressure, don't let him breathe, break him. The instructor was Riker Donovan. No mistaking that. He moved through the room like a king surveying his kingdom, all coiled power and absolute confidence. 6 feet tall, maybe 200 pounds of muscle earned through years of training that probably bordered on obsessive. His rash guard bore a custom patch, a hammer crushing a skull. Subtle. Kira watched as he stopped beside 2 Marines grappling for position. The larger one had the smaller, pinned, working for a rear naked choke. The smaller one was tapping, frantically, desperately. Donovan kicked the larger Marine in the ribs, not hard, just enough. Don't let go until he earns it, Donovan said. His voice carried across the room, meant for everyone to hear. In combat, the enemy doesn't give you a break because you tapped. You fight until you can't fight anymore. The larger Marine held the choke. The smaller one's taps became weaker. His face went from red to purple. Finally, Donovan nodded. Now release. The smaller Marine collapsed, gasping, coughing. No one helped him up. Lesson learned. Kira pulled out her notebook, made her first entry. First violation of the day, and it was only 0635. Donovan noticed her. Of course he did. She was the only woman in the room, the only Navy uniform in a sea of marine green. She was impossible to miss, and that was exactly the point. He crossed the room with that same predatory confidence, stopped a few feet away, close enough to be confrontational without quite crossing into assault. Dominance behavior. Territory marking. The kind of thing that probably worked on junior Marines who hadn't spent years learning to read body language in life-or-death situations. Can I help you? He asked. Pleasant tone. Polite words. Eyes like a shark. Lieutenant Commander Brennan, Kira said, meeting his gaze without flinching. I'm here for training evaluation. You must be Corporal Donovan. That's right. He glanced at her notebook. What kind of evaluation? Safety protocols, training methodologies, compliance with updated combatives standards. Sounds like a lot of paperwork. That's what happens when people get hurt. Kira made another note. Or worse. Something flickered in Donovan's eyes. Too fast to catch, but there. Recognition. Threat assessment. The realization that this wasn't just another admin officer doing make work. We run a tight ship here, he said. Everything by the book. Ask anyone. I will. Kira turned her attention back to the mats where training had resumed. In the meantime, I'll be observing. Don't let me interrupt. Donovan held his position for another moment, testing, measuring. Then his mouth curved into a wolf's expression, sharp, calculating. Observe all you want, Commander, he said. Just try not to get in the way. Things can get intense here. Wouldn't want you to get hurt. He walked away before Kira could respond. Classic power move. Get the last word, establish dominance, make the other person feel dismissed. Kira wrote in her notebook, Donovan, poor impulse control compensation behaviors, likely narcissism. A voice beside her quiet measured, You just made an enemy. Kira turned. The man who'd spoken was smaller than Donovan, leaner, with the weathered look of someone who'd spent more time in field than Jim. Sergeant Stripes. Age maybe 30-31. His name tape read Hartley. Sergeant, Kira acknowledged. Cole Hartley, ma'am. He didn't offer his hand. Smart. Word of advice. Donovan doesn't like being watched. And he especially doesn't like being challenged by. He stopped himself, but Kira knew how the sentence ended. By women, by Navy, by anyone who threatened his little kingdom. Noted, she said. How long have you been training here, Sergeant Hartley? 3 years. He watched Donovan demonstrating a submission on a young private who looked terrified. Long enough to know how things work. And how do they work? Hartley's jaw tightened. You tap when Donovan says you tap. You fight how Donovan says you fight. You don't question, you don't complain, and you definitely don't write it down in a notebook. Kira met his eyes. They were conflicted, angry, ashamed. You were here when Dylan Chambers died, she said quietly. Hartley's face went blank, completely neutral. The face of a man who'd learned to hide his emotions under military discipline. That was ruled an accident, he said. I read the report. Then you know all there is to know, ma'am. But his eyes told a different story. His eyes said, I saw everything. I know the truth. I'm too scared to say it. Kira tucked her notebook away. Thank you for the advice, Sergeant. I'll keep it in mind. She found a spot against the wall where she could observe without being obvious. Pulled out her phone, made it look like she was checking messages. Actually, she was studying the room, the dynamics, the relationships, the subtle hierarchies that existed beneath the official rank structure. Donovan was the sun everyone orbited around. Some Marines gravitated toward him like moths to flame, eager for attention, validation, the chance to be part of his inner circle. Others kept their distance, training quietly, avoiding eye contact. And then there was the kid filming everything on his phone. Lance Corporal, early 20s, built like a linebacker, but with the enthusiasm of a puppy. He circled the room, capturing training footage, occasionally shouting encouragement, clearly loving every minute. His name tape read Bishop. Kira made a mental note. Bishop was Donovan's propaganda minister. Every kingdom needed one. She spent 2 hours watching, making notes, documenting violations that ranged from minor safety oversights to outright dangerous techniques being taught as standard practice. Submissions held too long, strikes thrown at full power with minimal protection. Junior Marines pushed past their limits while Donovan watched with that same predatory expression. At 08:30, the session ended. Marines filed out, heading for showers and breakfast. Donovan stayed behind, working a heavy bag with the kind of focused intensity that suggested anger management issues. Kira waited until the room was nearly empty, then approached him. Corporal Donovan, she said, a moment of your time. He stopped mid-strike, breathing hard, sweat running down his face. What do you need, Commander? I observed several protocol violations this morning. I'll be filing a preliminary report with Colonel Garrett. Donovan grabbed a towel, wiped his face slowly. Violations like what? Submissions held past tap-out. Full contact strikes without proper protection. Excessive pressure on junior personnel who are clearly outmatched. That's called training, Commander. We're not running a daycare here. Training has standards, Corporal. Those standards exist to prevent injuries. Or worse. There it was again. That flicker in his eyes. Anger, defensiveness, guilt. You think you know better than me how to train Marines? Donovan asked, voice dropping lower. How many combat deployments you got, Commander? How many times you put hands on an enemy? Kira didn't answer. Didn't need to. Her ribbon rack spoke for itself. Bronze Star, Purple Heart, Combat Action Ribbon. Donovan saw them, and something shifted in his expression. Calculation replacing anger. Look, he said, forcing his voice into something approximating reasonable. I get it. You've got a job to do. I respect that. But you're Navy. Different culture. What we do here might seem aggressive to an outsider, but it works. My Marines are the best trained combatives specialists on this base. I'm sure they are, Kira said, but being the best doesn't exempt you from regulations. Regulations written by people who've never been in a real fight. Regulations written by people who've seen what happens when training becomes abuse. The temperature in the room dropped 10 degrees. Donovan stepped closer. Not quite threatening, not quite aggressive, but definitely invading personal space. You accusing me of something, Commander? Kira held her ground. Didn't step back. Didn't show weakness. I'm observing and documenting, she said. If you feel accused, that's your conscience talking. For a moment, she thought he might actually swing. His hands flexed. His shoulders tensed. Every muscle in his body coiled like a spring, ready to release. Then he smiled. That same predatory grin. You know what I think, Commander? I think you're here because someone complained. Some weak link who couldn't handle the intensity. So they sent you to come babysit us, make sure we're being nice and gentle. He leaned in closer, voice dropping to a whisper. But here's what I know about you. I know about Travis Holden. I know about Bud Says, June 2021. I know you killed a man during training. Kira's blood went cold. So before you start judging my methods, Donovan continued, maybe you should examine your own. At least my Marines are alive. He stepped back, grabbed his gym bag, walked toward the exit. Enjoy your evaluation, Commander. He called over his shoulder. Try not to kill anyone while you're here. Kira stood alone in the empty bay, her father's letter burning like fire in her pocket, Travis Holden's ghost whispering in her ear, and Dylan Chambers' broken neck staring up at her from a medical examiner's photograph. She pulled out her phone, sent a text to Callahan. He knows who I am. This just got complicated. The response came back 30 seconds later. Motor pool. Now. The motor pool smelled like diesel fuel and old grease, a mechanical graveyard where Humvees went to die slow deaths of bureaucratic neglect. Kira found Callahan sitting on the tailgate of a deuce and a half smoking a cigarette that technically violated about 6 different base regulations, staring at something on his tablet. He didn't look up when she approached, just took another drag, exhaled smoke into the afternoon heat. Donovan knows about Holden, Kira said without preamble. Of course he does. Callahan flicked ash onto the concrete. Military's a small world.
Smaller when you're famous for killing someone. He do his research, or did someone feed him the information? Does it matter? Everything matters. Callahan finally looked at her, and there was something in his expression that might have been sympathy if he was the type to waste energy on soft emotions. He's going to use it against you. make you doubt yourself, make everyone else doubt you. It's basic psychological warfare. Undermine your credibility before you can undermine his. Kira leaned against the truck, felt the sun-heated metal through her uniform. So what do? We turn it around. Callahan turned the tablet toward her. Email from Naval Special Warfare Command. Official letterhead. Her eyes scanned the text, then stopped. Demonstration Protocol Alpha, she read aloud. Full contact demonstration. No restrictions on technique or intensity, as long as safety measures are in place. Callahan's smile was sharp.
You're authorized to engage with any personnel, any skill level, under official observation. It's basically command telling you if Donovan wants a fight, give him one. Officially, they're setting him up. They're giving you tools. What you do with them is your choice. Callahan pocketed the tablet. Colonel Garrett just got off the phone with MARSOC Command. General Donovan is already pushing for your removal. Says you're biased, compromised. He's got 3 senators making calls. Can he do that? He's trying, but this authorization changes the game. It came from high enough up that even a 3-star can't touch it. Callahan took another drag. Here's the thing Donovan doesn't know about Protocol Alpha yet. So when he challenges you publicly, which he will, you'll have official backing to accept. And once you're on that mat, with cameras rolling, everything he says and does is evidence. Kira understood. The trap wasn't just psychological. It was procedural, legal, institutional. Friday night, she said. He'll make it official Friday night. And you'll be ready. Callahan crushed out his cigarette, pocketed the butt. Your father flew into a missile to save his wingman. You're about to walk into a trap to save every Marine who'd trained under Donovan's system. Different battlefield, same honor. He slid off the tailgate, started walking toward his truck. Training starts tomorrow 0500, he called over his shoulder. We've got 4 days to make sure you're ready. Get some rest, Commander. You're going to need it. The truck rumbled to life, diesel engine coughing black smoke. Callahan drove off without another word, leaving Kira alone in the motor pool, with the weight of what was coming. She pulled out her phone, looked at her contact list, scrolled to a name she hadn't called in 3 years, Jessica Palmer, the woman she'd saved, the woman whose trauma had cost Travis Holden his life. Kira's thumb hovered over the call button. What would she even say? I'm about to do it again. I'm about to put myself in a position where I might kill someone. Want to talk me out of it? She put the phone away. Some conversations were better left for after, if there was an after. That night, Kira couldn't sleep. She paced her quarters, reading and rereading her father's notes in the margins of the karate book Callahan had given her. His handwriting, his wisdom, his understanding that strength was a burden to be carried carefully. One passage he'd underlined 3 times. The ultimate aim of karate lies not in victory or defeat, but in the perfection of the character of its participants. Perfect character. Her father had died for that, had flown into a missile so someone else could live, had chosen sacrifice over survival because his character demanded it. Could she do the same? Could she face Donovan without becoming him? Could she use violence without being consumed by it? The questions followed her into restless sleep, where Travis Holden's face merged with Dylan Chambers' face, and her father's voice whispered from 33 years in the grave. Strength without wisdom destroys. She woke at 0400 to her alarm already exhausted. Bay 3 was dark and empty when she arrived. Callahan stood in the center of the mat waiting. 2 coffee cups sat on the bench. Black, no sugar, warrior fuel. Couldn't sleep either, he said, handing her a cup. Does it ever get easier? Kira asked. Living with what we've done? No, it gets familiar. There's a difference. Callahan set down his coffee, stepped onto the mat. We're not doing kata today. We're doing scenario training. You need to be able to fight Donovan without letting muscle memory take over. I can control myself. Travis Holden would disagree, but he's not available for comment. The words hit like a slap. Kira's hand tightened on the coffee cup, hot liquid sloshing dangerously close to the rim. Callahan didn't apologize, just watched her with those merciless eyes. "You want to know why your father was the best warrior I ever trained?" he asked. "It wasn't his skills. Plenty of Marines had skills. It was his fear. He was terrified of his own power, terrified of what he could do if he lost control. That fear made him careful, made him precise, saved lives." He stepped fully onto the mat, settling into a fighting stance that looked casual but was anything but. "You've got that same fear," he said, "that same terror of yourself. Good. We're going to use it. We're going to teach you how to fight at 70% instead of 100, how to dominate without destroying, how to break Donovan without killing him." Kira set down her coffee. "How do we do that?" "By making you face exactly what you're afraid of." Callahan gestured to the mat. "Come at me. Full contact. Try to hurt me." "Master Chief, I don't think—" "That's an order, Commander. Attack me like I'm Donovan. Like I'm the man who killed Dylan Chambers. Like I deserve everything you can give me." Kira hesitated. Callahan was 61 years old, missing 3 fingers, probably carrying injuries from 4 decades of combat and training. "I could hurt you," she said. "Then hurt me. Let's see if you learned anything from killing Holden." The words detonated something in Kira's chest. White-hot anger, shame, guilt. All the emotions she'd been suppressing for 3 years suddenly bubbling to the surface. She attacked. Fast. Vicious. A karate combination that should have ended with Callahan on his back with a broken nose. He wasn't there. 61 years old, and he moved like water. Redirected her strike, used her momentum against her, put her face first on the mat so fast she didn't have time to process what happened. "Again," Callahan said calmly. Kira got up. Attacked again. Different angle, same result. Again, and again, and again. For 30 minutes, Kira threw everything she had at Callahan, and for 30 minutes, he dismantled her with the kind of effortless precision that came from experience measured in decades instead of years. Finally, exhausted and humiliated, Kira stayed down. "You know what your problem is?" Callahan asked. He wasn't even breathing hard. "You fight angry. Anger makes you predictable. Predictable gets you killed, or gets someone else killed." He offered his scarred hand. Kira took it, let him pull her up. "Donovan fights angry too," Callahan continued. "That's his weakness. He thinks aggression equals skill. Power equals victory. But you know better. Your father taught you better." He walked to his gym bag, pulled out the worn karate book, handed it to her again. "Read it. Study it. Your father understood something most warriors never learn. That true strength isn't about how much damage you can do. It's about how much damage you can prevent while still achieving your objective." He pointed to a passage Kira had read 100 times. "There's a section about Kokyu, breath control, timing, the space between action and reaction where decisions are made. Your father mastered it. Saved his wingman because he had the control to choose sacrifice over survival." Kira opened the book to that section. Her father's handwriting filled the margins. Notes about breathing, about finding calm in chaos, about the moment between seeing a threat and responding to it, where character was forged. "I don't know if I can be that controlled," she said quietly. "When I see Donovan, when I think about what he did to Dylan, I want to hurt him. I want him to suffer." "Good. Use that." Callahan picked up his coffee, drained it in one long swallow. "But channel it, direct it. Make him suffer psychologically, not physically. Break his ego, not his body. That's how we get the confession." For the next 3 days, they trained. Not kata, not forms. Real combat scenarios designed to teach Kira how to fight at controlled intensity. How to dominate without destroying. How to find that space between mercy and murder where justice lived. Callahan was relentless, brutal in his honesty. Every time Kira threw a technique with too much power, he stopped her. 70%, he'd say. That was 90. Again. Every time she hesitated, showed mercy, he punished her for it. Donovan won't hesitate, neither can you. But you can be precise, controlled, again. By Thursday night, Kira's body was a constellation of bruises. Her hands were raw, her ego was shattered and rebuilt 3 times over. But she was ready. Friday arrived with the weight of inevitability. Kira woke at 0400, couldn't go back to sleep. Spent an hour reading her father's notes. Spent another hour in the shower, letting hot water pound against muscles that felt like they'd been through a war. At 0700, her phone buzzed. Text from an unknown number. Looking forward to tonight, Commander. Try not to tap too fast. Bishop's followers want a show. Riker Donovan, of course. Kira didn't reply. Anything she said would just feed his ego. Better to let silence do the work. At 1400, Colonel Garrett called her to his office. I authorized the demonstration bout, he said, sliding paperwork across his desk. Full safety protocols, medical staff on standby, multiple camera angles, JAG observer present, everything by the book. Thank you, sir. Don't thank me yet. Garrett leaned back in his chair. General Donovan knows about this. He called me personally, threatened to have me relieved of command if anything happens to his son. And you said, I told him that his son volunteered for this demonstration, that all safety measures are in place, and that if he has concerns about training protocols, he should direct them to MARSOC Command. Garrett's smile was thin. Then I reminded him that I saved his ass in Mogadishu, and he owes me. How'd that go over? About as well as you'd expect. Point is, we've got political cover for tonight. But if something goes wrong, if Donovan gets hurt beyond normal training injuries, the blowback will be severe. Kira nodded. Understood, sir? One more thing. Garrett pulled out another file. Sergeant Cole Hartley came to see me this morning. Requested permission to testify as a witness if this goes to court-martial. Kira's pulse quickened. He's willing to talk. He says he saw what happened to Dylan Chambers. Says his conscience won't let him stay silent anymore. I've given him protection, assigned him to special duty away from Bay 3. If Donovan gets wind that Hartley's talking things could get complicated fast. Does Donovan know? Not yet, but he will. Hartley's not showing up for training. That'll raise questions. Kira stood. Then we better make tonight count. 1900 hours. Bay 3 looked like a Roman Colosseum. Every available space packed with bodies. Marines, sailors, even some civilians who'd somehow gotten base access. The smell of sweat and anticipation hung thick in the air. Bishop had set up a professional streaming rig. 3 cameras, professional lighting, a microphone boom that looked like it belonged on a movie set. The kid was serious about his propaganda. Kira arrived in her karate gi, traditional white, no patches, no rank insignia, just clean cotton and a black belt that had been earned through decades of training. Callahan walked beside her old boxing coach Energy, carrying a medical kit and a towel. Remember the plan, he said quietly. Round 1, test his skills. Round 2, dominate him. Round 3, break him. Make him think about Dylan. Make him remember what he did. And if he doesn't confess, then we've got footage of you beating him fair and square. Sometimes that's enough to crack a man's armor. We'll see. They entered the bay. The crowd noise hit like a physical force. Cheering, shouting, the kind of energy that turns sporting events into blood sport. Donovan was already there, standing center mat, surrounded by his disciples, wearing a rash guard with that same hammer and skull logo, looking like he owned the world and everyone in it. Bishop had his camera trained on Donovan's face, catching every angle of manufactured confidence. Ladies and gentlemen, Bishop announced, voice echoing through the bay. Tonight we have a special demonstration.
Corporal Riker Hammer Donovan versus Lieutenant Commander Kiera, Ghost, Brennan. Marine versus Navy. Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu versus Karate. 47-0 versus, he paused for effect, 1 KIA. The crowd murmured. Everyone knew about Travis Holden now. Donovan had made sure of it. Kiera ignored the commentary, stepped onto the mat, took her position opposite Donovan. Colonel Garrett entered through a side door, followed by a JAG officer and 2 medical personnel. Official observation. Everything documented. This is a controlled demonstration bout, Garrett announced. All safety protocols in effect. All submissions will be honored immediately. Medical personnel are standing by. Any violation of these rules will result in immediate termination and disciplinary action. He looked at Donovan, then at Kiera. This is about skill and technique, not ego, not revenge. Understood? Yes, sir, Kiera said. Donovan just offered that predatory grin.
The referee, a senior NCO, who looked like he'd rather be anywhere else, called them to center mat. "Touch gloves," he said. Donovan extended his fist. Kiera touched it. His hand was rock solid. No nervousness, no doubt. "Good luck, Commander," he said loud enough for the cameras. "Try not to die." The referee stepped back. "Fight." Part 1. 1 ends. 4. 850 words. Donovan came in fast, aggressive, exactly what Kiera expected. He shot for a double-leg takedown, committing fully using his weight advantage to drive through where she stood. Kiera executed Tai Sabaki, body evasion, a karate fundamental so basic it was taught to children. She simply wasn't there when Donovan arrived. He crashed into the mat face first. The crowd gasped. Donovan popped up immediately, face flushed, embarrassment replacing confidence. "Lucky," he muttered. He came again. Different angle. Same aggression. This time, Kiera used Ashi Barai, foot sweep, timed perfectly to catch his forward momentum. Donovan went down hard, and Kiera could have followed up, could have transitioned to a submission. She didn't. Just reset to her stance, waiting. "Stand up," she said quietly. "Let's try again." The crowd fell silent. The script wasn't going the way they'd expected. The undefeated Marine legend was getting handled by a Navy officer who moved like water and struck like lightning. Donovan stood breathing harder now, anger replacing strategy. He charged. Wild haymaker. The kind of punch that belonged in a bar fight, not a martial arts demonstration. Kiera slipped under it, caught his extended arm, applied a standing armbar with textbook precision. Donovan tapped immediately. Survival instinct overriding ego. Kiera released instantly, stepped back, reset. The referee called it. Round 1 to Commander Brennan. Donovan's face had gone from red to white. His disciples looked confused. This wasn't supposed to happen. Their god was bleeding. Round 2 started 30 seconds later. Donovan tried to be technical now. Used his Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu properly. Shot for a single leg secured, it brought Kiera to the mat. Finally his element. Ground fighting, where weight and pressure mattered. He worked to establish position. Kiera defended calmly, using karate's ground defense principles. Nawaza. The art of fighting from your back. Not as refined as BJJ, but effective when done correctly. They grappled for 2 minutes. Donovan trying to pass guard. Kiera defending, deflecting, waiting for the mistake. It came. Donovan overcommitted to a position, posted his arm too far, left his elbow exposed. Kiera transitioned smoothly into Jujigatame. Cross armbar. The BJJ practitioner's nightmare, executed by a karate master who'd spent 25 years studying submissions. Donovan tapped, hard, repeated, no hesitation. Kiera held for 1 extra second, not enough to injure, just enough to send a message. Then released. The crowd was stunned silent. Donovan stood slowly, his confidence shattered, his legend crumbling in real time. "One more round," he said, voice strained. "Why?" Kira asked, loud enough for everyone to hear. "You've already lost twice, because I don't lose not to Navy, not to—" He stopped himself, but everyone knew what he'd almost said. Kira circled him slowly. "Predator now, not prey. This is how Dylan Chambers felt, isn't it?" she said, voice calm, clinical. "When you wouldn't let go, when he tapped 4 times and you kept choking him." The temperature in the bay dropped 20 degrees. "What?" Donovan's voice cracked. "September 3rd, 20:47 hours, rear naked choke. He tapped at 2 minutes 13 seconds. You held for 40 more seconds until he stopped breathing." The crowd erupted in whispers. Bishop's camera was still rolling, still streaming, capturing everything. "I don't know what you're talking about," Donovan said, but his voice betrayed him. "Show me." Kira gestured to the mat. "Show everyone here the exact technique you used on Dylan. If it was just training, demonstrate it." I can't." "Why not?" "If it was an accident, prove it. Show us how an accident happens when someone taps 4 times. Donovan was shaking now, unraveling in real time. He didn't tap hard enough. He just kept fighting. And I thought, if I held on, he'd learn to tap faster. And the words hung in the air, like a confession, written in fire. Sergeant Cole Hartley stepped forward from the crowd. "I was there. I saw him tap 4 times. You didn't let go, Riker. You killed him." The bay exploded, shouting, accusations, cameras flashing. Military police entered from both doors. Colonel Garrett must have had them standing by. The MP sergeant approached Donovan with handcuffs. "Corporal Riker Donovan, you're under arrest for involuntary manslaughter and conduct unbecoming. You have the right to remain silent." Donovan collapsed to his knees. "No, no, no, no. Dad's gonna kill me. Oh God, Dad's gonna—" They dragged him away in restraints, still mumbling about his father. Bishop's stream had 14,000 live viewers. The confession captured in high definition from 3 angles. Kira stood in the center of the mat. Her father's book in Callahan's gym bag, Dylan Chambers' ghost, finally quiet, and the weight of another life lived, because she'd learned control. Callahan approached, put a hand on her shoulder. "Your father would be proud," he said quietly. Kira nodded, unable to speak around the lump in her throat. Justice, she thought. Not revenge. Justice. The difference mattered. The difference was everything. The media storm hit before Kira made it back to her quarters. Bishop's live stream had gone viral in the worst possible way for Riker Donovan, and the best possible way for anyone who believed in accountability. 14,000 viewers had watched the confession live. By midnight, that number had multiplied to 500,000 across multiple platforms. By morning, it would be 2 million. Kira sat in her quarters, staring at her phone as notifications scrolled past like artillery fire. News outlets, military blogs, veterans organizations. Everyone wanted a statement. Everyone wanted her side of the story. She turned off the phone. Outside her window, Camp Pendleton continued its endless rhythm. Marines running evening PT, vehicles rumbling past. The base didn't care about one corporal's arrest or one commander's investigation. The machine kept grinding forward, indifferent to individual tragedy. A knock at the door. 3 sharp raps. Military precision. Kira opened it to find Colonel Garrett standing in the hallway, still in his uniform, despite the late hour. His face was carved from exhaustion and something that might have been satisfaction. "Commander," he said, "we need to talk." She stepped aside, let him enter. The quarters were Spartan. Bed, desk, a photograph of her father in his flight suit, nothing else. Everything else was just weight. Garrett sat in the only chair, gestured for Kira to take the bed. Old school courtesy. the kind that came from officers who still believed in propriety. "General Donovan called me an hour ago," Garrett said without preamble. "He's threatening everything from congressional investigation to court-martial. Says his son was entrapped, that the whole demonstration was a setup designed to humiliate the Marine Corps." "Was it?" Kira asked. "Yes, absolutely, and I'd do it again." Garrett's smile was sharp. "But we need to be prepared for blowback. General Donovan has friends, powerful friends. They're going to come after you, after me, after anyone involved in exposing his son. Let them come. Easy to say now, harder when your career is on the line." Garrett pulled out a folder, handed it to Kira. "This is what you need to prepare for." Inside was a notice. Official military letterhead, Naval Inspector General's office. "They're reopening the Travis Holden investigation," Kira said, reading the document with a sinking feeling in her stomach. "Due to renewed public interest and questions about Lieutenant Commander Brennan's judgment and use of force during training scenarios." Garrett's voice was flat. "They're going to review every detail, every statement, every piece of evidence, and they're going to do it publicly." Kira set down the folder. "They want to discredit me, make it look like I'm no better than Donovan." "Exactly. If they can prove you used excessive force against Holden, then your testimony about Donovan becomes suspect. Self-defense from a fellow killer instead of justice from a righteous investigator." "But the board already cleared me. Justified self-defense. No charges." "That was a quiet review. Internal. This will be different. Public scrutiny, media attention. Every decision you made that day will be examined under a microscope." Garrett leaned forward. "Are you ready for that, Commander? Are you ready to relive the worst moment of your life in front of the entire country?" Kira thought about Travis Holden's throat collapsing under her hand, Jessica Palmer screaming, the blood, the desperate CPR that couldn't bring back someone whose trachea had been crushed. "I don't have a choice," she said quietly. "No, you don't." Garrett stood. "The review board convenes Monday. Naval Base, San Diego. You'll have the weekend to prepare. Master Chief Callahan has agreed to testify on your behalf. So has Sergeant Hartley. We'll make sure the truth comes out." He walked to the door, paused with his hand on the knob. "For what it's worth, Commander, you did the right thing. Both times. Holden was assaulting a recruit. Donovan murdered a Marine. You stopped them both. History will remember that, even if the present wants to crucify you for it." He left without waiting for a response. Kira sat alone in the silence, her father's letter burning like coal in her pocket. Strength without wisdom destroys. But what happened when you had both, and the world still wanted your head? The weekend passed in a blur of preparation. Callahan drilled her on testimony. What to say, what not to say. How to present facts without emotion, truth without defensiveness. "They'll try to make you angry," he said, Saturday morning over terrible base coffee. "They'll imply you're a murderer hiding behind a uniform. They'll suggest you enjoyed killing Holden, that you're unstable, dangerous, a liability. And I just sit there and take it. You sit there and tell the truth, calmly, clearly, without apology." Callahan's scarred hand wrapped around his coffee cup. "Your father faced enemy fire without flinching. You can face a review board." Sunday night, Kira couldn't sleep. She paced her quarters, reading and rereading her father's notes in the karate book. His handwriting.
His wisdom. His understanding that strength was a burden to be carried carefully. At 0300, she gave up on sleep, went to Bay 3, the scene of both her triumph and her upcoming trial. The mats were empty, lit only by emergency lighting that cast everything in shades of gray. She moved through kata, slow, meditative, each technique a prayer to discipline, each breath a reminder that control was the difference between warrior and murderer. Couldn't sleep either. Kira turned to find Sergeant Cole Hartley standing in the doorway. He looked like he'd aged 5 years in the past week. Eyes hollow, face drawn, the weight of conscience visible in every line. "Sergeant," Kira acknowledged. "I wanted to thank you," Hartley said, stepping into the bay, "for giving me the courage to speak up. I should have done it the day Dylan died. Instead, I stayed silent for 2 months because I was scared of a general's stars and my own cowardice. You're testifying now."
That's what matters. Is it? Hartley's laugh was bitter. Dylan's still dead. His father still lost his son. All because I was too weak to stand up to Riker Donovan. Kira stopped. Her kata faced him fully. "You know what Master Chief Callahan told me, that the strongest warriors aren't the ones who never fall. They're the ones who get up and make sure no one else falls the same way. You're getting up, Sergeant. That takes more courage than people realize." Hartley was quiet for a long moment. "Then, they're going to tear you apart at that review board. You know that, right? General Donovan's already leaked information to sympathetic media. Conservative outlets are running stories about how you're a radical feminist who hates men. Liberal outlets are questioning why a trained martial artist couldn't subdue Holden non-lethally. Both sides want my head. Both sides want a villain. You're convenient." Hartley moved to the memorial wall where Dylan's photograph hung. "But some of us know the truth. You saved Jessica Palmer. You exposed Donovan. You're doing what everyone else was too scared to do. Doesn't feel like victory. Because it's not. Not yet. Victory comes when Donovan's in prison and the Marine Corps changes its training culture so this never happens again. Everything else is just fighting to survive long enough to see it." He left without another word, leaving Kira alone with the ghosts and the memories. Monday arrived with the inevitability of Judgment Day. Kira dressed in her service dress, blues, every ribbon precisely aligned, every button polished to mirror shine. If they were going to examine her, she'd give them nothing to criticize in presentation. Callahan drove her to Naval Base San Diego in his ancient Ford pickup that smelled like gun oil and old leather. They didn't talk much. There wasn't much to say that hadn't already been said. The review board convened in Building 3, Conference Room A.
A sterile space with government-issue furniture and fluorescent lighting designed to make everyone look guilty. 5 officers sat behind a long table, their faces carved from professional neutrality. Presiding officer, Rear Admiral William Thorne. 58 years old, silver hair, sharp eyes. The man Kira's father had died protecting. Kira hadn't known that detail until Callahan mentioned it. Looking at Thorne now, she could see echoes of the scared young pilot from her father's photograph. 3 decades of rank and responsibility had hardened him, but the debt was still there, written in the way he looked at her. Recognition, obligation, guilt. The prosecution was Commander Hayes from JAG, a woman in her 40s with the kind of sharp intelligence that came from years of dismantling arguments for a living. Defense was Lieutenant Commander Sarah Oakes, younger, hungrier, the kind of lawyer who took cases because she believed in them, not because they advanced her career.
The proceedings began with clinical efficiency. Commander Hayes laid out the case. June 15, 2021. Bud S. Training Facility. Seaman recruit. Jessica Palmer, assaulted by Petty Officer Travis Holden. Lieutenant Commander Brennan intervened with lethal force. Holden dead 37 minutes later from crushed trachea and associated trauma. The question before this board, Hayes said, her voice carrying the weight of institutional authority, is whether Lieutenant Commander Brennan's use of force was justified or whether it constituted excessive response from a martial arts expert who should have known better. She pulled up video footage, grainy security camera feed from June 2021. Kira watched herself on screen, younger, less scarred, running toward Jessica Palmer as Holden grabbed the young woman's arm, his other hand moving toward her chest. Kira's voice tinny through old speakers. "Stand down, Holden." Holden shoving her hard, Kira stumbling back. Then the strike.
So fast, the camera almost missed it. Shuto uchi. Knife hand to the throat. Textbook technique. Perfect form. Lethal application. Holden collapsing. Kira immediately dropping to perform CPR. Jessica Palmer screaming. Other personnel rushing in. Chaos and horror captured in institutional video quality. Hayes paused the footage. Lieutenant Commander Brennan is a 5th-degree black belt in Shotokan karate. She has trained for 25 years. She knows intimately which techniques are lethal and which are not. The strike she delivered to Petty Officer Holden was designed to kill. Objection. Lieutenant Commander Oakes stood. The strike was designed to stop an immediate threat. The lethality was unintended. Was it? Hayes pulled up medical records. The autopsy shows Holden's trachea was completely crushed. The force required to achieve that level of damage indicates full commitment to the technique. Not a controlled response, not a measured defense.
A killing blow delivered with expert precision. Kira felt her jaw tighten, felt the old guilt rising like bile. Hayes wasn't finished. Furthermore, Lieutenant Commander Brennan had multiple non-lethal options available. She could have used a wrist lock, an armbar, a takedown. Instead, she chose the most lethal technique in her arsenal. Why? All eyes turned to Kira. Admiral Thorne's voice cut through the tension. "Commander Brennan, you may respond." Kira stood. Months of preparation with Callahan paid off now. Her voice was steady, clear, without apology or defensiveness. "I responded on instinct," she said. "My training took over in a high-stress situation. Petty Officer Holden was assaulting Seaman Recruit Palmer. When I intervened verbally, he assaulted me. I defended myself using the techniques that had been burned into my muscle memory over 25 years of training." Muscle memory. Hayes pounced on the phrase. "Meaning you didn't consciously choose to kill him. Your body simply executed a lethal technique without your brain's permission." "That's not what I said." "But it's what happened, isn't it? You lost control. Your training overrode your judgment. And a man died because you couldn't regulate your response in a training environment." Hayes leaned forward. "How is that different from Corporal Donovan holding a choke too long? Both cases involve trained fighters using excessive force during training. Both resulted in death. The only difference is you're claiming accident while accusing him of murder." The words landed like artillery. Kira felt the trap closing. Hayes was good. Too good. Lieutenant Commander Oakes stood quickly. "The difference is intent. Petty Officer Holden attacked first. He assaulted Seaman Palmer and then assaulted Commander Brennan. Private First Class Chambers was a willing training partner who tapped 4 times while Corporal Donovan deliberately maintained a chokehold for 40 additional seconds. The circumstances are not comparable." "Aren't they?" Hayes pulled out another document. "I have testimony from 3 sailors who were present that day. They state that Lieutenant Commander Brennan and Petty Officer Holden had previous friction, that she disapproved of his training methods, that there was personal animosity." "That's standard professional disagreement," Oakes countered, "or premeditation. A trained killer waiting for an excuse to eliminate someone she viewed as problematic." Hayes turned back to Kira. "How many times had you fantasized about hurting Holden before June 15th? I never. How many times did you imagine striking him, teaching him a lesson, putting him in his place?" Kira's hands clenched. Callahan had warned her about this. The attempt to provoke anger.
To make her look unstable. "I never fantasized about hurting anyone," Kira said carefully. "I recognized that Petty Officer Holden's training methods were aggressive and potentially dangerous. I reported my concerns through proper channels. And when those channels didn't give you the result you wanted, you took matters into your own hands. I defended a sailor from assault. You executed a man who made you angry. Objection! Oakes's voice cracked like a whip. Commander Hayes is testifying instead of questioning. Admiral Thorne held up a hand. Sustained. Commander Hayes, ask questions. Don't make speeches. Hayes nodded, but Kira could see the satisfaction in her eyes. The seed of doubt had been planted. The board members were exchanging glances, uncertainty replacing certainty. I have no further questions for the defendant at this time, Hayes said. But I would like to call a witness. Seaman Jessica Palmer. The room went silent. Jessica Palmer entered through the side door, and Kira's heart broke a little. The young woman looked nothing like the terrified 18-year-old from that day. She was older now, harder, carrying herself with the careful control of someone who'd learned that the world was dangerous and trust was expensive. She took the witness chair without looking at Kira. Hayes approached gently. Seaman Palmer, thank you for agreeing to testify. I know this is difficult. I am here because I was ordered to be here, Jessica said. Her voice was flat, emotionless. The voice of someone who'd been through too much therapy to have feelings left. Can you describe what happened on June 15th, 2021? Jessica's hands clenched in her lap. Petty Officer Holden grabbed me during an obstacle course run. He said things, made suggestions, put his hands on me. I tried to push him away. He wouldn't stop. And then Lieutenant Commander Brennan intervened? Yes, she ran over.
Told him to stand down. He shoved her. She hit him. Jessica's voice cracked slightly. And then he was dying, and there was blood, and screaming, and I couldn't. She stopped breathing hard. Hayes gave her a moment. Do you blame Lieutenant Commander Brennan for Petty Officer Holden's death? The question hung in the air, like a grenade with the pin pulled. Jessica finally looked at Kira. Their eyes met across the room. Trauma, recognizing trauma. Survivor, seeing survivor. I blame Travis Holden for Travis Holden's death, Jessica said quietly. He assaulted me. He assaulted Commander Brennan. She defended us both. What happened after that? I wish he'd lived. I wish it hadn't come to that. But I don't blame her for protecting me. Hayes hesitated clearly, not expecting that answer, even though her response was lethal, especially because her response was lethal, because it meant she was willing to put everything on the line to stop him, her career, her freedom, her peace of mind. Jessica's voice strengthened. I've spent 3 years in therapy trying to process what happened that day. And you know what my therapist keeps telling me? That I survived because someone stronger intervened. That Commander Brennan saved my life. Maybe she used too much force. Maybe she should have pulled that strike. But in that moment, she chose to protect me over protecting herself. That's not murder. That's sacrifice. She stood without being dismissed. I'm done testifying. If you want to punish Commander Brennan for saving me, that's your choice. But you'll have to live with it. Jessica walked out, leaving silence in her wake. Admiral Thorne cleared his throat. Defense, do you have any witnesses? Lieutenant Commander Oakes stood. Yes, Admiral. I'd like to call Master Chief Garrett Callahan. Callahan entered with the steady confidence of a man who'd testified in front of everyone, from boot lieutenants to 4-star generals. He took the witness chair, raised his scarred right hand, swore to tell the truth. Oakes approached respectfully. Master Chief, how long have you known Lieutenant Commander Brennan? Known of her for 33 years. Met her formally 2 weeks ago. Callahan's voice filled the room without effort. But I knew her father, Captain Declan Brennan, from 1987 to 1990. Trained him at Force Recon School. Best warrior I ever had the privilege of serving with. What happened to Captain Brennan? He died protecting his wingman during Operation Desert Storm. February 27, 1991. Took a surface-to-air missile that was meant for another pilot. Callahan looked directly at Admiral Thorne. That pilot was Admiral Thorne. The room erupted in whispers. Admiral Thorne's face went pale. Oakes let the moment breathe, then continued. Did Captain Brennan leave anything for his daughter? Yes, or a letter, written before deployment. Callahan pulled out the worn paper.
Kira's heart clenched, seeing it in someone else's hands. May I read it? Admiral Thorne nodded, unable to speak. Callahan's voice was steady, but something underneath suggested emotion carefully controlled. He read her father's words, the advice about strength and wisdom, the warning about power without restraint, the final message about living with honor. When he finished, the silence in the room was absolute. Captain Brennan understood something most warriors never learn, Callahan said, folding the letter carefully. That true strength isn't about how much damage you can inflict. It's about how much damage you can prevent while still accomplishing your mission. He died preventing damage. His daughter lives by the same code. He looked at each board member in turn. When Lieutenant Commander Brennan killed Travis Holden, she was preventing damage. To Jessica Palmer, to herself, to every other sailor Holden would have assaulted if someone hadn't stopped him.
Was it perfect? No. Was it excessive? Maybe. But was it necessary? Absolutely. Commander Hayes stood. Master Chief, you weren't present during the Holden incident. How can you testify to necessity? Because I've been present during 40 years of training incidents. I've seen what happens when predators are allowed to operate unchecked. I've seen the bodies. I've notified the families. Callahan's eyes were hard. Travis Holden was a predator. The investigation after his death found evidence of 3 other assaults he'd covered up. 3 other sailors he'd victimized. Commander Brennan stopped him before there was a 4th. That's speculation. That's pattern recognition. Callahan leaned forward. You want to know the difference between Commander Brennan and Corporal Donovan. She's spent 3 years agonizing over a death that saved lives. He spent 2 months covering up a murder because his ego couldn't handle losing. She has nightmares about her victim. He has Instagram followers celebrating his violence. If you can't see the difference, you have no business sitting in judgment. Hayes's face flushed. Master Chief, you're out of line. No, Commander. I'm exactly where the line is drawn. And so is Lieutenant Commander Brennan. Callahan stood. Her father died with honor. She's lived with honor. If this board can't recognize that it's your failure, not hers. He walked out without waiting to be dismissed. Callahan didn't wait for permission. The board deliberated for 4 hours. Kira sat in a waiting room with Oakes and a ghost of Callahan's presence, drinking terrible coffee and watching the clock tick forward with the rhythm of water torture. Finally, the summons came. They returned to conference room A. The board members looked exhausted. Admiral Thorne especially. The weight of 3 decades of debt visible in every line of his face. This board has reviewed all evidence regarding the death of Petty Officer Travis Holden on June 15, 2021. Thorne began, his voice formal but strained. We have considered testimony from multiple witnesses, examined video evidence, and consulted with medical experts regarding the use of force. Kira's hands clenched. A presence beside her whispered strength. We find that Lieutenant Commander Kira Brennan acted in justified defense of herself, and Seaman Recruit Jessica Palmer, Thorne continued. Petty Officer Holden's actions constituted assault and battery. Commander Brennan's response, while lethal, was a reflexive action consistent with her training and the immediate threat presented. He paused, and something shifted in his expression. The Admiral falling away. The survivor emerging. However, this board recognizes that Commander Brennan has carried extraordinary guilt for this incident. We also recognize her exemplary service record following this tragedy.
Purple Heart for wounds sustained in Afghanistan, Bronze Star for valor, and most significantly, her actions at Camp Pendleton that exposed a culture of abuse and secured justice for Private First Class Dylan Chambers. Thorne stood. The other board members stood with him. Therefore, this board rules: no disciplinary action warranted. Full exoneration. Furthermore, we recommend Lieutenant Commander Brennan for promotion to Commander, 05, and assignment to Naval Special Warfare Command as Director of Combatives, Ethics, and Training Reform. The words hit Kira like a wave. She couldn't breathe, couldn't process. This board also notes, Thorne continued, his voice rough with emotion, that Captain Declan Brennan saved my life on February 27, 1991. He flew his aircraft into a missile that was meant for me. He had a wife and a 6-month-old daughter at home. He sacrificed everything so I could live. Thorne looked directly at Kira. I've spent 33 years trying to be worthy of that sacrifice, trying to honor your father's memory by serving with the same integrity he showed. When your case came before me 3 years ago, I made sure justice was done. Not because of politics, not because of favors, because Declan Brennan's daughter deserved the same honor her father gave to others. He saluted, sharp, precise. The salute of a man paying a debt that could never truly be repaid. Kira returned it, tears streaming down her face. You're dismissed, Commander Brennan, Thorne said gently. Go build something that makes your father proud.
1. Part 2 ends. 100 words. November brought an unexpected letter. Prison mail from Fort Leavenworth. Riker Donovan's handwriting shaky and uncertain. Commander Brennan, I don't expect forgiveness. I don't deserve it. But I need you to know that I see it now. What I did to Dylan, what I became. My father built me into a weapon and forgot to teach me when not to fire. I've got 8 years to figure out who I am without the anger, without the need to dominate. The prison chaplain gave me your father's letter, the one Master Chief read at your hearing. I read it every day now. Strength without wisdom destroys. I destroyed Dylan. I destroyed my father's career. I destroyed myself. I can't fix any of that. But I can try to be someone different when I get out, if I get out. Thank you for stopping me before I killed someone else. Kira read it twice, then filed it away. Some apologies needed to exist without requiring response. Some healing happened in silence. She didn't write back. But she didn't throw the letter away either. Redemption, she thought, wasn't her responsibility to grant. It was Donovan's responsibility to earn. General Marcus Donovan resigned in October, 3 weeks after Riker's court-martial. The official statement cited personal reasons. The unofficial truth was that 3 senators and a SecDef had made it clear his career was over. Last Kira heard, he was teaching ROTC at a small college in Montana, trying to rebuild a relationship with a son who couldn't look at him without seeing 30 years of pressure that led to murder. Some fathers and sons never recovered from war, even wars that happened on training mats instead of battlefields. The interview with Frontline Stories podcast aired in early November. Kira kept her message simple. Dylan deserved justice. The system worked. Now came the harder work of prevention. 800,000 downloads in the first week. Trending number 3 on Apple Podcasts. The comments section became a forum for veterans sharing stories of toxic training cultures and the leaders who'd changed them. The conversation had shifted from what happened to what happens next. By January 2025, the Chamber's protocol was official policy. Named after Dylan, implemented across Camp Pendleton. mandatory tap-out education, psychological evaluations, independent oversight, body cameras during combatives training, zero tolerance for post-tap submissions. Kira was appointed Director of Implementation. She worked with Callahan to develop curriculum. Bay 3 was renamed Chambers Memorial Training Center. A photograph of Dylan in dress blues hung at the entrance, his smile eternal, his sacrifice meaningful. The first class graduated in February. 60 Marines and sailors, including Cole Hartley, who'd transferred to become a senior instructor, including Trent Bishop, who'd been demoted to private but given a second chance.
The kid who'd live-streamed Donovan's confession now ran the official Chambers Protocol social media channels. His Instagram had evolved from Crucible Chronicles, celebrating violence, to Honor Code Training, showcasing proper technique, safety protocols, and warrior philosophy. His follower count had actually grown. 50,000 Marines and sailors watching videos about controlled aggression, tactical breathing, and the importance of tapping out. "I used to think views meant violence," Bishop told Kira during a training session. "Bigger hits, crazier submissions, more blood. But turns out people respect competence more than chaos." "Who knew?" "Your generation," Kira replied. "You're the ones who'll carry this forward." Bishop nodded seriously. "We won't let you down, ma'am. We won't let Dylan down." He filmed the rest of the session with care and precision, capturing warriors learning instead of warriors bleeding. The difference mattered.
Kira taught the opening session of that first class. 60 warriors watching her with varying degrees of skepticism, respect, curiosity. "Combat is chaos," she said, standing center mat in the facility where she'd broken Riker Donovan. "Training is control. If you can't control yourself on these mats, you won't control yourself in combat. And uncontrolled warriors don't win battles. They create casualties." She demonstrated kata, every movement precise, powerful, beautiful. The art of violence transformed into discipline. A young Marine raised his hand. "Ma'am, could you beat all of us?" Kira smiled. "Wrong question, Lance Corporal. Right question is, can you beat your ego, your anger, your need to prove dominance instead of demonstrate skill? Those are your real enemies. Master them here, or they'll master you out there." The training continued. Months passed. The Chambers Protocol spread beyond Pendleton. Other bases requested implementation. Army, Air Force, even civilian law enforcement agencies wanted to learn the system that valued control over chaos. By March, Kira received a visitor. Lieutenant Colonel Derek Stone, 39 years old, Army Special Forces, former MMA fighter, sent by Pentagon traditionalists to evaluate whether the new protocols were, in his words, making warriors soft. They met in Kira's office. Stone was respectful, but skeptical, square-jawed, confident, the kind of operator who'd earned his reputation through legitimate skill. "Commander Brennan," he said, shaking her hand with a grip that tested strength. "I've read your protocols, impressive on paper, but I have concerns about practical application." "I'm listening, Colonel." "Combat isn't safe. We're training people to go into the worst situations humanity can create. If we sanitize training too much, we fail them when it matters." Stone leaned back.
How do we maintain combat effectiveness while implementing these restrictions? "By understanding that control isn't restriction," Kira replied. "Would you like a demonstration?" Stone's smile was genuine. "I'd be honored." They scheduled a sanctioned demonstration bout. Full safety protocols, medical supervision, multiple observers, everything by the book that Kira had written. The match began with mutual respect. Stone was legitimately skilled. Special Forces combatives, refined through years of deployment and competition. He took Kira down multiple times using techniques that combined wrestling, judo, and street fighting pragmatism. For the first 5 minutes, Stone dominated. His strength advantage was significant. His experience was evident. Kira defended, deflected, weathered the storm. Callahan, watching from the sideline, called out, "Patience! He's stronger, but you're smarter." Kira reset mentally. Stopped trying to match Stone's strength. Started using pure karate. Timing, angles, precision. 25 years of training distilled into motion that looked effortless because it was efficient. She caught Stone mid-attack with perfect taisabaki, redirected his momentum, executed ippon seonagi, one-arm shoulder throw. Stone hit the mat hard but safely, the kind of impact that demonstrated skill without causing injury. He stood slowly, genuine surprise on his face. "How did you experience, Colonel? You're stronger, faster, but I've been studying this for 25 years. You can't overpower decades of refinement." Stone absorbed that, processed it, made a decision. "Teach me," he said. "Teach me how to train my soldiers with this level of control." Over the next 6 months, Stone became one of the Chamber's protocol's strongest advocates. He co-authored a training manual with Kira, helped expand implementation to Army Special Forces, proved that traditional warriors could evolve without losing their edge.
By December 2025, Master Chief Garrett Callahan retired after 43 years of service. The ceremony was held at Chambers Memorial Training Center. 500 personnel in attendance, general officers, enlisted, civilians, everyone whose life had been touched by a warrior who understood that wisdom mattered as much as strength. But before the ceremony, the world learned something else. The ceremony ended. Kira was shaking hands, accepting congratulations, when a familiar face appeared in the crowd. Jessica Palmer, now 22, wearing navy dress blues with petty officer second-class insignia. She'd stayed in, thrived in, become what Travis Holden had tried to destroy. "Commander," Jessica said, saluting. Kira returned it. "Petty Officer Palmer, you look good in those blues. I almost didn't stay in, after everything." Jessica's voice was steady now, stronger. "But then I thought if I leave, he wins. Holden wins. All the predators win. So you stayed." "I stayed. And I became a victim advocate. I help sailors who go through what I went through. I make sure they know someone will protect them." Jessica smiled, and it was genuine. "I learned that from you." They stood in silence for a moment. Two survivors, two warriors. "Thank you," Jessica finally said, "for saving me, and for showing me what strength actually looks like." She saluted again and disappeared into the crowd, leaving Kira with the understanding that some rescues echoed across years, building ripples that turned into waves. Kira presented Callahan with a shadow box. Inside his Force Recon insignia, Captain Declan Brennan's FA-18 Squadron patch, a replica of Dylan Chambers' dog tags, and a photograph of all three men together, digitally created but emotionally true. The plaque read, "To the warrior who taught me that strength and wisdom aren't enemies, they're brothers in arms." Callahan's speech was brief. He'd never been one for long speeches.
"I'm 62 years old," he said, his voice carrying across the silent crowd. "I've trained thousands of warriors over 4 decades, seen them in training, seen them in combat, seen them come home changed, or not come home at all." He paused, looking at Kira. "But Commander Brennan taught me something I never learned in Desert Storm or Mogadishu or any of the battles I fought. She taught me that the strongest warrior isn't the one who never falls. It's the one who gets up and makes sure no one else has to fall the same way." He saluted the crowd. Dylan Chambers died, but his death wasn't meaningless. Because of Kira Brennan, hundreds of warriors will train safely, will go to combat prepared, will come home to families who won't have to bury them because someone taught them control instead of chaos. That's the legacy I'm leaving. That's the torch I'm passing. And I trust it's in good hands. He walked off to thunderous applause. As he passed Kira, he whispered, "Your old man would be damn proud. I know I am." That night, Kira returned to Chambers Memorial Training Center, 0300, the building empty except for ghosts and memories. She stood in the center of the mat where she'd fought Donovan, where Dylan had died, where justice had been served in blood and honor. Her phone buzzed. Text from an unknown number. "Commander Brennan? This is Ensign Melissa Harper. I'm Dylan Chambers' cousin. I'm starting BUD/S prep next month. I was wondering if you had time to meet. I want to learn from the person who got justice for Dylan." Kira stared at the message, the cycle continuing. One generation teaching the next. Legacy built not on domination, but on wisdom passed forward. She typed a response. "Chambers Memorial Training Center, tomorrow, 0500 hours. Bring your gi and an open mind. Send." She looked around the empty training center one last time. This room had seen death, had seen justice, had seen transformation. Her phone buzzed again. This time, a photo. Melissa Harper had sent a picture of herself in BUD/S training gear, standing in front of a memorial wall. Dylan's photograph visible behind her. The caption read, "He wanted to be Force Recon. I'm going to be a SEAL. For both of us." Kira felt something break open in her chest. Not grief, not guilt. Something else. Something that felt like purpose, crystallizing into clarity. Dylan Chambers hadn't died for nothing. His death had sparked a revolution. His memory demanded they never forget. Riker Donovan hadn't won. Violence hadn't won. Ego hadn't won. Wisdom had won. Control had won. Honor had won. And Captain Declan Brennan, who died 33 years ago protecting his wingman, had taught his daughter well enough that she'd protected an entire generation of warriors he'd never meet. Legacy wasn't about living forever. It was about building something that outlasted you. Kira pulled out her father's letter one last time. Read the words she'd memorized years ago, but finally, truly understood. "Strength without wisdom destroys. Strength with wisdom builds. Build something that lasts, Kira. Build something I'd be proud of." She folded the letter, placed it in her desk drawer next to Dylan's dog tags, in a photograph of Callahan in his Force Recon days. Tomorrow, Melissa would arrive. The work would continue. The cycle of teaching and learning and protecting would spin forward. But tonight, standing in the darkness before dawn, Kira Brennan allowed herself to believe she'd done it. She'd built something her father would be proud of. And that was enough. She turned off the lights, locked the doors, walked out into the California night where the Pacific wind carried the smell of salt and possibility. Behind her, on the wall of Chambers Memorial Training Center, 2 photographs hung, side by side. Dylan Chambers, in dress blues, smiling toward a future he'd never see. Captain Declan Brennan, in his flight suit, grinning at a daughter he'd never meet. Between them, a plaque with words engraved in bronze. The Chambers Protocol, strength through wisdom, honor through control. Below that, smaller text, Since January 2025, zero preventable training deaths in naval special warfare programs. Dylan's sacrifice had meaning. Declan's legacy lived on. And Kira Brennan, daughter of heroes and maker of warriors, walked forward into the work that would define the rest of her life. Building something better, teaching wisdom alongside strength, proving that the strongest warriors were the ones who knew when not to fight, and how to fight with honor when battle was inevitable. The sun would rise in a few hours. Ensign Harper would arrive at 0500. The work would continue. But for now, in the darkness before dawn, Kira allowed herself a moment of peace, a moment of satisfaction, a moment of knowing that her father would have been proud, that Dylan Chambers could rest, that justice, when earned through sacrifice and served with wisdom, was worth every scar it left behind. The Pacific wind whispered agreement, carrying the promise of tomorrow toward warriors yet unborn, who would train under protocols written in blood but enforced with honor, in a system that finally understood the difference between strength that destroys and strength that protects. And in that difference lived the future of warfare itself.